So everybody, thank you for coming, and thank you for being willing to let us record this. This is our Exchequer Seneschal discussion. I don't know if my Kingdom counterpart, the Kingdom Exchequer, has joined us. I didn't see her on the list. So unfortunately, you will be probably getting this predominantly from a Seneschal standpoint. However, we've been going through quite a lot of documentation, and I see that I have a bunch of former Exchequers and current Exchequers online to support us. So we're going to get this started. First, I'd like to lay the groundwork for any discussion with some very basic information that probably most of you know, but I think it's a good reminder.
Sir, it's coming in now.
Thank you. So that we can have a decent discussion. Let me try to share my screen here. All right, so I'm getting better at this, but I'm not the best at it. So here we go. And I obviously can't even spell, so there's that. So welcome to the Seneschal and Exchequer meeting. We're going to touch on dominantly on some basic things about the roles of Exchequers and Seneschals in relation to each other and the roles of the financial committee. And now, admittedly, this does not cover everything. This is a very brief, very short presentation. Please feel free to interject or ask questions if you have any. So first, are these slides big enough for everyone to see on whatever tool they're using, like computer or phone or whatever? Okay, Melody's got her thumb up, great. So first of all, the role of the financial committee. I'd like everybody to just try to remember that. It's to approve the budgets of events or ask for additional information or ask for changes to be made to the event budget. In contrast, the role of the financial committee is not necessarily to approve an event. So a couple of tips for the financial committees, and this is just out of my personal experience. And I think it helps things work a little smoother, is if folks do not read into the governing documents. What I mean is they don't, if you read a particular rule, that is the rule, and don't add things to it. Reread the governing documents if necessary. If there are any questions, reread the governing documents. But try to keep in mind that not everything is covered in our governing documents. And if questions arise, we need to try to work it out at the lowest level possible, which initially is your financial committee. So try to work things out with your financial committee, and this is important, consult with your Kingdom counterpart. But keep in mind that they may have to consult with the society counterpart if it's a particularly difficult question that they haven't run into or may not be covered in the governing documents. Or, not every officer is required to know every officer's handbook. So it's really important to realize that, everybody has their own specialization, that they're, things that they're up on or up to date on. For instance, I was an Exchequer 15 years ago, so I know what those rules were 15 years ago, but I am not necessarily as up to date as I would like to be on the current rules. So the other thing is, do not, please remember this. Do not publish or announce anything regarding an event that's coming up until you're in, or the finances or the pre-registration, until the entire financial committee is on board. That'll help everybody work together as a team and maybe not feel like somebody's kept out in the cold. So another thing to keep in mind when you're working with these governing documents to determine what you can and cannot do is to look at the order of precedence of documents or the order of precedence of the rules. The most important thing is that mundane law trumps any SCA laws. We're a 501c3, and so we are held to the 501c3 rules as written by the federal government. That's our group. If we're Drachenwald, it would be a different set of mundane laws. We also, the next thing is SCA bylaws, and then corporate policy, corpora, and then governing documents, interpretation of corpora by the society's Seneschal, corporate officer policy, kingdom financial policy, kingdom law, followed by decisions of the crown, followed by kingdom officer policy, followed by kingdom officer handbooks. So that's a whole lot of information, but the order of precedence is published in several different documents, including the Society's Seneschal Handbook. I believe it may be published in Corpora. So there are several places to find that. Any questions? All right, so that's like some of the harder stuff. So the role of the Seneschal in regards to finances is to serve on the financial committee. So the Seneschal has one vote, and it's to approve the Exchequer's report and review the monthly bank statements, as well as sign any contracts. The role of the Exchequer is to serve on the financial committee, and according to kingdom law, is the accurate and timely reporting of finances, chair and run the financial committee, report to the populace as to the financial status of the group. And I think all those things, and these are not all inclusive rules. These are just some of the highlights that I've been able to pull together, and I feel were important to remind folks, because I know in some groups, sometimes, occasionally, that kind of gets missed. And additionally, the role of the Exchequer, according to kingdom policy, is to report event finances. So not everything, again, is spelled out in our governing documents, word for word. So the tips in working with your financial committee and the other officers is to try to work cooperatively. Everybody, again, is not required to know all the governing documents of the SCA. And that's why going to your counterpart, working as a group, is always better. It's more minds are better than one. Right now, every month we're having a monthly Seneschal's meeting, and I think that helps us work through things. Discuss issues by passing information on, by giving, not saying in the handbook it says this, but please give the page of the handbook or the page of the law or whatever document it is, and the date the document was written, because these things are getting updated so frequently, sometimes lately anyway, that it can be confusing, and we can be working off literally different pages of the same handbook. So there's been a lot of changes. So the other thing is, try working within the guiding documents, and if you do not see something in them, consult your kingdom counterpart. So running of events. Oh, sorry, I'm having trouble with my Zoom by the way. All right. So Corpora says that the Exchequer is responsible for the general conduct, or no, sorry. The Seneschal is responsible for the general conduct of the event when it's a multiple activity event. Society financial policy states that at gate, 2 paid adult members of the SCA must be there at all gate functions. Kingdom financial policy states that cash receipts must be given to the Exchequers or their designee. and at least 2 adult members of the SCA must be in charge of gate functions at any given event. Further, the Society Exchequer Handbook states that the branch exchequer is responsible for gate management, making sure there is, and it is defined as making sure that there is adequate staff, funds for the cash box, paperwork, and the paperwork is provided and filled out. Sorry about my misspellings. So that's really, in a nutshell, what I wanted to share with the group. And then I wanted to have any discussion or any questions that folks had. Yes, Don, or sorry, Sarah.
That's okay. I just wanted to point out that there's an entire chapter if you want to learn more about financial committees and what responsibilities and jobs and decisions and all of that kind of thing that takes place within the financial committee. There's a whole chapter on financial committees in the Society Handbook for Exchequers. Chapter 3, actually, if that helps.
Thank you. And then have we had that pulled over onto the Exchequer section of the Kingdom webpage?
Yeah, it's in the Kingdom Library and it's also in the Exchequer Library.
Great.
The whole handbook.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have any other questions? This is a really quiet group, but I felt that we need to start having some of these discussions because, you know, we can meet as individual groups or we can meet as a kingdom. However, it seems like sometimes we have a lot of confusion with financial committees. I don't think I've ever served on a single financial committee where everybody knows everything. In all honesty, I've seen a lot of financial committees where folks don't necessarily follow policy because this is the way we've done it for 20 years. And yeah, it was policy maybe 20 years ago, but there's been a lot of revisions since then. So I just kind of really want to remind everybody to go to their handbook. And if you don't find it in your handbook or in any of the governing documents of the SCA, don't read into it. Work together as a group and then consult with your kingdom officers to work through whatever it is that you have questions about. Now that's 20 minutes. We have another 20 minutes or 30 minutes if folks want to say anything.
I think your description also talked about the update on SCARS and PayPal.
Okay, right. Well, I don't have the information on SCARS or PayPal. Do you want to update us on that?
Sure. SCARS currently is the system that we're using for pre-reg if people want to prepay by a credit card or their own personal PayPal account, which, as most of us know, can be tied to a checking account or also your credit card or debit card. So I know a lot of people are concerned they want to pay ahead, but they don't want to use their credit card information. If they have a PayPal account of their own, they can actually pay on SCARS using that payment method. And since all events are 100% pre-reg, we have figured out that we can also use SCARS for free events. So we are trying to do that as much as possible. It is something that the groups need to decide and send an authorization to the Kingdom SCARS deputy to load that event into the SCA website. And that usually goes through the financial committee because they want to make sure that the pre-reg is handled, because it's a money thing. The financial committee can decide where they want their pre-reg to take place. Yes, Melodia and Christine. Go ahead, Melodia.
I just wanted to state that we're having a SCARS class later.
Yep.
So if you have more questions about how to set it up for your event, Aishi will be in there to answer all your questions.
Yep, I believe that's at 1 o'clock.
And I wanted to ask real quick. The Heralds were wondering, in our last discussion, I think it was the last one, if the PayPal payments for heraldry, is that optional? They're thinking it might be required.
Some kingdoms are actually requiring heraldry to be paid via PayPal because they were having a lot of problems with commingling of funds. So heralds were taking payments from people in cash or checks made out to the herald personally in those kingdoms, and then the herald was writing a personal check to the branch to pay for heraldry, and that is a huge, huge no-no for society. It is not allowed for us to commingle SCA funds, which is the submission that the submitter gave to the herald, with the personal funds, which is the check the herald wrote, personal check the herald wrote to the Exchequer. And so a lot of kingdoms are debating on whether to go to 100% PayPal for heraldry. We are not in that discussion at this time, but it will be an option. I believe December 1st, we're going to open up the option to pay for heraldry through PayPal. And that'll be late in the OH, but we'll probably
Okay, great.
post
That was the
it on
question.
Facebook.
I just wanted to make sure I answered it correctly. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great question. That is the update for PayPal, is that we'll be opening up to heraldry payments as of December 1st. Jethro, did you have a question?
Yeah, so on that, the last I had seen, that certainly we're still taking checks for the heraldry, but last I had seen, cash was discouraged, but it wasn't unacceptable last I had heard.
Correct.
Still be okay.
Yeah. And it's important though that if your heralds are taking cash, that they have maybe an envelope or a pouch or something, that they keep it separate and that they're not tucking it in their wallet or their purse or whatever.
Right.
It does need to be kept separate.
Right. There's certainly that aspect, but it is still permissible. Discouraged. Certainly, if we can do a check. And now that PayPal, I hadn't heard that PayPal was going to be offered for a heraldry. That's great. So, and I know heraldry is going up to $5 in 2 days. So
yes. Yep. Yeah. Cash will probably always be acceptable. It's harder to track if somebody pays in cash, but like, I don't know that we can ever not take cash for heraldry payments, because a lot of people don't carry checkbooks or even own a checkbook. So.
right, and then for the $5, sometimes here's the $5, and you can see the Exchequer right at the practice or something.
Yeah,
that's just
yeah, and it's up to each group how they want to do that. If the heralds prefer that the money is given directly to the Exchequer, that's absolutely okay. They just need to. There's a heraldry form, a payment record that they need to complete, just so that everybody has a record, documentation, paper when money's involved.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, so we're taking 100% pre-reg on scars, but your group does have to request it. And it is the use to use PayPal and scars is actually approved on a case-by-case basis, because in our policy we have society has required that people who are using those services have to be reporting on time. So when an authorization for those types of services are requested, it does come to my office first to be approved, because say Barony of Whatsits didn't report their third quarter this last time. So I am not going to allow them to use the privilege of scars or PayPal until they have their reporting up to date. So that's just kind of a thing to think about when we're talking about using the pre-reg services that we have. So I think that's pretty much it. And I was just looking at the chat, the heraldry submissions do go up to $5 on 11/15 next Monday. All right, Christine, back to you.
Christine, you're muted. You're muted, Christine.
Well, I had no further information. I just really wanted to go over, remember the guiding documents, the order of precedence of the documents, and to remind folks that to try to work cooperatively and contact their kingdom counterpart if they're having issues. Yeah, is there anything else?
I'm going to answer the question that just came up in chat about how
Thank
that
you.
will affect payments that were accepted earlier this month. And that I'm going to repeat what came from White Stag, which is anything that has been received by the Herald and or Exchequer prior to November 15th is going to be costing the $4, and the Kingdom and whomever will adjust accordingly if it's been received by the Herald or Exchequer prior to the 15th. After the 15th, it's going to be $5 from anyone who sends in at that point. Does that clarify for whomever asked that?
Yeah, so when we put in our heraldry report at the end of the month, will we just kind of notate on there somewhere? I think that I'm not looking at the form in front of me, but I think there's a place where we put in the date that it was received. So if we just put in the date that it was received before the 15th and it clearly shows $4, if it was after the 15th and $5, we should be gravy as long as it's noted on that form.
That is my understanding. That's what White Stag was saying on the heraldry list. So I'm going with that.
There's a column on that form for a date of check, I believe. Maybe
In
it's
this case, it was a cash receipt.
Okay, yeah, just put a date on there.
Okay.
We don't have to be super picky since it's transitioning in the middle of a month. I think it'll be understandable if I get the report from you that says this submission was $4, but this other one was $5, I'm not going to question it. Next month I will.
I have a general hypothetical question.
Mhm.
You had mentioned that the committee, the financial committee, has the Seneschal chaired by the Exchequer, and then you have to have another member. Is it required that the Baron and Baroness share a vote?
Yes.
So that's not really in what has been stated before. So the default for most financial committees would be chaired by the Exchequer, members being one vote for Baron and Baroness and one vote for the Seneschal. What is the escalation procedure if suddenly that is not an amicable relationship between those three people? Right now, I do not foresee this ever happening in my lifetime with my barony.
Yeah.
But it just seems that it would be a possibility that you would end up with factions and stupid decisions being made, and the Exchequer trying to help steer the financial ship.
Right. Generally, it's recommended that you have an odd number on purpose so that you don't have tiebreakers. Now, when you have a B&B or a Crown who are sharing a vote, if they can't agree, they're not voting, and then you're kind of stuck with the tiebreaker again. So the default would be that it doesn't pass, whatever you're trying to get approved. So if you have, it might be better to have 5 members. That way you have a few more hands in the air, potentially.
I was referring more escalation process of when do you get the Kingdom Seneschal involved? When do you get the Kingdom Exchequer involved? And how does the royalty filter into this? If the Baron and Baroness go off the rails for some reason, just hypothetical, what is the common procedure for that, if there is one?
Well, Christine and I think would both agree we would want to know what the situation is going on down there and see if we could talk it out with them. As far as officially filing something, I think it depends on who's unhappy. Like, I guess if it's the Seneschal that's unhappy, then they would probably talk to Christine, and same with the Exchequer. If it's the B&B, they'd probably talk to the Royals already, or have been talking to the Royals. I would say, generally speaking, it would escalate to the Seneschal's office first.
You know, there's no written procedure on that. That's why, you know, we're saying that we try to work together as a financial committee. However, that's why we do everything by vote, and we try to make sure our financial committees are unevenly distributed so that you won't have any ties theoretically. One quick correction to one thing that was said was that default is that your baron and baroness are on the policy, but if you live in a shire or other groups, the default is usually one other member of the populace. Some of those other groups have had problems because their financial committees get too big. Instead of being 3, they'll have 5 or 7, 5 or 7, 5 or 7. And then you get into, that's when you actually get into these situations more often where you have factions. It seems like when you have 3 people, it tends to not be as difficult.
Yeah, it could be either way. It depends on if all of your financial committee members are always able to attend, because you do need to have a quorum before you can take a vote. And a quorum is usually a majority of the committee is present. So when you only have 3, sometimes that's a little harder to accomplish unless you're doing it by email, which is entirely possible.
Right. Remember, email is always an option.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, in some ways, sometimes it's easier.
Yeah. And you can do virtual committee meetings. The only thing that you can't do is social media for voting. You cannot vote over social media, period. Zoom doesn't count as social media, by the way. Does that kind of help?
It helps a little bit, but I'm still foreseeing a day when one of us, as the exchequer for the local group, is going to want to put some pressure on other members of the committee to not do something stupid. And we may not have the authority to do it ourselves.
Well,
keep in mind, keep in mind that there are things that are a hard no.
Right.
That an exchequer can bring in.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you can't buy alcohol, you can't buy fireworks, you can't, you know, there are certain things that the exchequer can just go, nope.
And same with the Seneschal, there could be legal ramifications on a decision that the financial committee is trying to make, that the Seneschal can step in and say, hey, wait, we actually can't do that in this state.
Right. So the Baron could decide he's going to bring fireworks to an event and pay for it themselves, and the Seneschal can say, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
If it's a law.
Actually, the exchequer can say no too, because it's in the financial policy.
Well, we're not paying for it. We don't have.
Well, true.
You know, that
True.
was the theory, was that we were not paying for it, so the exchequer has no authority at all over what somebody else is going to bring to the event for free.
But in that case, if it is illegal, hopefully your Seneschal catches that, and then they can say, heck no. They can also, you know, say, no, we will not be having whatever it is illegal. And, you know, in some cases, say on Forest Service property, we've had this happen. Mm-hmm. You know, it is illegal to set off certain devices over a certain decibel limit. So cannons, even the ones that are like the little chemical ones, are illegal within a certain distance of roads, campgrounds, other people camping. And in that case, because it violates the mundane rules of the site, the Seneschal can say, no, we can't do this.
Because mundane law has precedence over everybody.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about situations when it's not illegal, but it's stupid.
Yeah, if the Exchequer feels like there could be a significant impact on the group, they can step in and say, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. And then it would escalate to the Kingdom office. And if I can't help you guys resolve it, then we would go to the society level.
Well, and I have been in situations where some folks might consider it stupid, where the financial committee decided to attend an event, say, that wasn't necessarily SCA involved, but they used SCA funds, and because the financial committee voted for that, it was allowed. I mean, it didn't make a whole lot of sense but they felt like it was a recruiting issue, and they felt like they could recruit folks. And if the majority of the group or financial committee votes for that, that's what the majority votes for. But if it's illegal or against actual policy, that's when we can say no.
Right.
Eva?
My question was, if you have a virtual meeting, could you turn around and have the email sent to like the Exchequer account for voting?
If you're having a virtual meeting, the Exchequer should be taking meeting notes, meeting minutes. And I would recommend that once the virtual call is over, that the Exchequer put it in writing what the meeting minutes are and email that to all of the financial committee members so that there's a written record also, not just a verbal misunderstanding later if things were heard a different way. Okay.
Yeah, in this case, your records or your meeting minutes are very important.
Absolutely. And required by Corpora, by the way.
So no other questions? I mean, we admittedly only have about 10 more minutes, so. Okay. Christina, is there anything else you wanted to, or Sarah, I guess, either of you have any big things to hit on?
Just if you have questions, you can always contact either one of us.
Right, and like I like to remind folks, and I say this every time I can get a chance, please go back to the governing documents, and instead of saying, well, in the handbook, specify Exchequer's handbook, this date, this page, it says, and that really can reduce any potential arguments.
Absolutely.
I think we can quit recording there, Violet.